Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is your T-shirted historian, and it is Dungeons and Discussions, and I've had far too little sleep this morning. Hi,
I'm
Graham.
too hot.
What, literally?
It's hot.
It's like the girls
Actual-
just like
No,
crawl all over you?
Temperature hot.
Oh, temperature hot. I thought the whole discount Rob Zombie thing worked for you.
It does, but melting doesn't.
Good point. Oh, we've got RD visiting us on X. Hey, man. Bingo Man Zero. Hey, good to see you, buddy. All right, so we have a really curious kind of a discussion to start us out with because this is a topic I've never really covered before. And I always kind of figured, it's one of those topics where you don't really need to talk about it because it's kind of like, well, this is, to avoid this, especially after you've gamed a couple of times. But I'm talking about PvP. Player versus player.
Right.
So, my thought on PvP initially is don't do it. Don't allow it. Don't let it happen. And what we mean by PvP, of course, is anytime you get inter-party fighting, where literally it's like, thief has been stealing from the party, everybody's pissed off at the thief, everybody confronts the thief, and in short order, the thief is going to get his ass handed to him, or he's going to get killed, or he's going to get his comeuppance from the rest of the party. That's a form of PvP. I guess you could include the description to include things like the bard, doing his seduction rolls to, get the nice paladin in compromising position. I guess basically anything that's PvP is anytime the players are actively rolling dice against one another or plotting against one another. I don't know. What do you think? Do you have anything to add on that, or?
So that latter part, rolling against each other, right? That can happen for good reasons. Like one character is determined to sacrifice themselves for the good of the party, and the others band together to stop them doing it. So that kind of thing can be dramatic and interesting and good, right? Even though it's going against perhaps the wishes of the player, and you end up rolling against their character as you do that. But by your broader definition, that would count as PvP. So that's a slight concern. Most of my experience with PvP has been in games where it's part of the setup. So like it's a LARP, right? Or it's a scenario where someone is playing a turncoat and, part of the game is to find out who or whatever. Those are defined scenarios in the case of the find the turncoat. But when it comes to LARPs and so on, you kind of have to have an element of PvP for the game to be self-sustaining. And that can be friendly rivalry or whatever else. I think it's only really in that first instance, and then not always, where one player is a difficult bastard and steals from the other players and stabs them in the back and is just out for themselves. That's the only one that I think is really absolutely a problem. But I think all of them need some skill to navigate properly.
Yeah. And I didn't really elucidate on this, but that's kind of my feeling too. It's like, yeah, there are certain type of game setups and instances where PvP is okay, such as a Braunstein, for example, where everybody already has secret orders and are acting on them. And depending on the orders, the GM may have you, shadow another PC or, kidnap another PC or do something else horrible. And there's also other kinds of hidden movement styles of the game where PvP can happen. It's like, I know Harmony Ginger has talked about it in some of her experiences, and so have most of the Bro SR. And of course, Jeff Rowe. That's a case where, since the players are the ones who are actively moving the plot along, the players are the plot, therefore the PvP in this particular instance, they're kind of acting as their own bad guys, as it were, or their own good guys, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
But, of course, when I speak about the kind of PvP you really don't want in a game is your regular setup game. Like, good example is Cyberpunk Edge Runners. Right? You've got all the Edge Runners, and they're all kind of working together. Everybody's got their own individual hang-ups and stuff, but everybody's getting through it okay. Well, partway through the series, you find out that one of the members is a turncoat and has been kind of, feeding the bad guys all the information, and she gets her payback because, Arasaka don't play right. But but still, it's a case of, if that were to happen in a regular Cyberpunk game, I'm pretty sure that would break up a game pretty fast. Of course, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, maybe not a good example because, eventually everybody in that crew dies, except for two people. So, two people. Yeah. Hey, James.
I mean, the other thing you can do is, if you're running two groups, you can have them be adversaries at a distance. So what one group does impacts what the other group does. Like, one group's working for the rebels, the other's working for the king, sort of thing. And that can be interesting.
Mm-hmm. What's going on this morning, Daniel?
Oh, the usual. Headed into the office. Doing my Tuesday morning, get off my Tuesday morning meet and hop on a Tuesday morning podcast.
Hey, always like that. All right, so the kind of PvP I'm really referring to is if you have a nice party of folks moving along and the game's going pretty good, but then you got one person in the group who insists on playing their character in such a way as to be adversarial to the other PCs, whether it's openly or secretly adversarial, it can become a problem. Because what happens is either A, it comes to blows, sometimes physically at the table. I've seen it happen. Or it just creates a feeling of resentment among most of the players for that player. Now, of course, the old, the old trick that they usually pull is it's what my character would do, or I'm just playing my character. Well, and I hate using that as an excuse, but
you should have created a character who wasn't a dick.
Yeah,
well, it depends on your character and the type of campaign and a bunch of other stuff. But I've literally only had one problem, and I've had in 20 some odd years, and I have done a lot of PvP. Like, I used to run back in the early to mid 2000s. I ran almost exclusively Evil 3.5 D&D campaigns, and it was never a discussion about who was, if somebody was going to kill one of the other PCs. It was a matter of when, and was it going to be, when was it going to happen, and who needed to look out, and really who was going to roll initiative first. But it's what my character would do only matters if it's actually something your character would do. So, for instance, if you have a truly evil character, they're not just killing the other party member for no damn reason at some random time. They're doing it when there is a distinct advantage to them doing it. And I'm not talking about, I want to swipe his vorpal sword. I'm talking about within the narrative that's developed in this game, there is a distinct and lasting advantage that makes it worth killing this other player or this other player character. But I mean, that's just a maturity thing too, because my players were always like, hey, you didn't kill me. You killed my character in a game. I'll roll another one. This self-insert, it's worse than the political nonsense where my identity has become whatever my political stances are because I have no personality. That shouldn't be your RPG character. It shouldn't be, well, this is some kind of stand-in for me. No, this it's a character in a game. Roll another one.
Huh. Well, that's a little further than I wanted to reach with that, but yeah, that tends to happen. I've noticed with a lot of PvP is the fact that people do get invested in their character. And if it's a game like Pathfinder 2, you didn't just roll that character up in 3 minutes. You had to spend some time putting together a build, thinking about how you were going to advance and what you were going to class into. And it takes time to build that character. Or if it's like hero system or something else that requires a lot of work to build a character, that's not the kind of game where you really want to stop and have to re-roll another character because, frankly, it just takes forever. And the thing is, people get invested in their character when they're creating it. So to get into a PvP with your own party and have your character get killed, that's going to most likely create some really harsh feelings for the player themselves. And
that's also where long form campaigns come in. Like, none of my games were super short either. So it wasn't like I got this character and he's just started rolling and he's 5th level and oh he's dead. I mean, we're 8, 9, 10 months into these games when this kind of PvP happens. Generally, the most common way it would happen would be like at the end of at the resolution of a major situation. And it's literally kind of like what you would call an after the final boss fight type thing. Like, I had an evil samurai decapitate our wizard literally while Orcus was busy dying or being sent back to hell. They were level 27. It wasn't I didn't get a chance to play my character.
I guess, well, I don't know. I would think that would be even worse just because of the fact that, yeah, you've got that much investment in a character. I mean, if you legitimately played a character from level 1 to 27, that's like, that's some serious time, unless your GM is just like, oh, sure, take 5 levels today. You did great,
Weekly game, a little over a year and a half. But
yeah, that's a long time to play a character.
True, but I've also said this before. I've mentioned before the vampire player agency nonsense that I ran across one time.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing in that same discussion, I had somebody. Hopefully, my dog does not bark at this person pulling in behind me at the office for the next door office. But the same person, they were acting like you can't just pick your character sheet up and go to another table or play them in a different game. Like that the character is literally dead and you put the character sheet in a paper shredder the second a character dies in game. That's not the case. It doesn't work that way.
Well, that's true. Although I did play in games like that growing up where, yeah, literally the GM would take your character sheet away from you and I guess pin it in their trophy case or whatever. But yeah, seriously, we were hardcore growing up. But I mean, I've seen this stuff just devolve into pure degeneracy at a table. You got a group together, they're moving through their objectives pretty good. And then you got the one player who, either just broke up with their girlfriend or they just got fired or they're just having a bad day, and instead of taking it out on the monsters, they decide they're going to take it out on the other party members. And then you've got the fighter just, suddenly, deciding today is the day he kills that, scheming thief, or he shows the wizard who's boss or whatever. And then you've got a party fight on your hands and stuff gets ugly, and games don't last when that kind of thing happens. I've seen it destroy games more than once. That doesn't necessarily mean that the players don't sit down to play all together at the same table again, but it pretty much it breaks up those campaigns.
No, absolutely. But that also kind of falls under the category of not really playing your characters properly, because me being pissed off does not mean my character suddenly goes on a murderous rampage against the rest of my party.
Well, I mean, people will justify it any way they want to, and they can come up with a number of reasons, especially depending on how alignment works in your game. If you do, in fact, use alignment. I'm not just necessarily talking D&D. Everybody defaults to D&D on stuff, but let's remember there are, hundreds and hundreds of games out there that you could play that are role-playing games and may or may not use an alignment system, and where players can just, do what they want to each other if that's what they wish. I've seen characters kill each other whenever it became opportune, because it's like they started out and they decided, well, because the book says I have a racial prejudice towards this particular race, and this other guy in the party is playing a member of that particular race, I'm going to wait.
Them.
Yeah, let's murder them. I'm going to wait until we're hip deep in combat, and then at some point, I'm going to accidentally slip and, either throw the grenade in their area or,
Now, that is a time-honored tradition that goes all the way back to Vietnam.
So fragging.
That should be allowed.
Fragging somebody. Well, I mean, to me, it's all about, and I guess I'm just blessed in a way that I had really close personal friends that were my group who played kind of in the spirit the game was meant. Like I never had, it wasn't until I started getting online with TTRPGs that I started running into these people who were self-inserting their characters and were really crazy metagaming and all the other stuff you hear about from bad player behavior. I had one who was a jerk.
Whoa. It doesn't have to involve self-insertion. Okay, I'm telling you.
I'm just listing off things. Like, I'm not saying that it's all self-insertion. I'm saying the list of bad player traits or disruptive problem things, metagaming, etc. That a lot. I didn't really have to deal with that except with one person in 15 years. Probably the first 15 years.
You were lucky. But like I said, it happened to me like on one of the very first games I ever played in a public forum. Here I am like 10 or 11 years old. I got my stupid character with me and, go to back in the day, we had a hobby store that had a gaming area where you could, people were running stuff and you could pick up games, just go join in on somebody's game and maybe make some friends and have a good time. Maybe. Operative word. But, we did a pickup game, and my character got more or less PvP'd by another party member within the first 5 minutes of the game. And I think I've told this story before, but Grim probably knows it. But it's, the guy apparently was running a Dragon Riders of Pern campaign, which I've never played that before. I have no idea what the books is. But yeah, the GM decided for whatever reason that the threads were going to drop that particular day, and for whatever reason, when my player tried to do something, somebody else had cast an anti-magic shield over the top of him, so he couldn't get any of his protective spells off, or anything else. He couldn't cast any spells to save himself. So he basically got eaten alive by the thread. And that was within the first 15 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
That just sounds like bad player. And also the kind of thing that the GM should probably do a little bit of that stepping in, because I'm not a big fan of a GM having to step in and basically say, hey, look, no, you're not. But, in a public game, it's like, hey, no, you're not going to do that, because there's absolutely no reason your character would ever do that for any reason. It makes absolutely no sense. Your metagame. So you want to rethink this, or does everybody else at the table need to roll new characters to play this game?
Well, I mean, he had a legitimate fear because I was going to throw a meteor swarm at the thread. So, they were apparently they're affected by fire. And I thought, oh, meteor swarm is more dangerous than fireball. So, but for some reason, he thought that the meteor swarm would be a huge danger to the party too. So he threw anti-magic shell out there. And this was, back in the day, so we didn't have a lot of rules governing, recognizing what somebody else was going to throw or anything else. We didn't really have any party cohesion either. But, that happened. It wasn't fun. It sucked. I played other games where the GMs were very adversarial, and they ran a game in such a way as to where it did pit the characters against one another from the way he would describe actions and things. So, I've seen my share of PvP happen all through growing up. It wasn't really until I got a solid gaming group that I played with on a regular basis that most of the PvPing stopped. I still had an adversarial GM every once in a while, and players and characters didn't always get along, but it rarely ever came down to blows. But I don't know. Maybe the pickup tabletop experience is largely absent from the gaming space these days. I don't know. I certainly don't feel like hanging out at the local gaming store hoping to get a spot at somebody's game. Unless it's like a game day or something, in which case, then they're supposed to have open games and let you try out a lot of different systems.
That's just kind of been replaced by Facebook groups and Facebook groups and Discord servers and that kind of thing, where you hop in and run games like that. The game store is still there. The game store dynamic is still there. It just moved. Me personally, I think in a lot of ways for the worse, because I think we do get a lot more of that kind of behavior when, let's just say devil's advocate here, that you have an asshole player who's going to be an asshole player, and that's just what they want to do. They're just trolling. They want to be a jerk.
Oh yeah.
That player has to mind his P's and Q's a little bit at the local game store, because he's eventually going to be the one that nobody lets sit at their table. But on a Discord game, he can hop to the next server, change his screen name, be like, you get an hour and a half into a game, you're like, hey, wait a minute, this guy sounds real familiar. That
is a good point. Towns and cities are small, and groups that gather at gaming stores do tend to kind of meet one another and get to know one another, and they do develop reputations. So, if word gets around that you're an asshole as a player, or you tend to run characters who are, all about PvP and want to hurt the other party members, or aren't afraid to hurt the other party members to get what they want, people are going to, tell stories about what you did, and word will get around the little gaming communities and stuff. And so people will, you will develop a reputation from it, because we had people like that. It's kind of like, oh no, don't play under this guy. He's a killer DM, or don't let this guy into your group just because he's an asshole and he'll overpower all your stuff because he's a min-maxer, et cetera, et cetera.
I think all of these things play a part. There's the people with the main character syndrome, and if they're not the main character, they get resentful of the other characters and undermine them, which is a form of PvP. I think there is the kind of over attachment that driving was driving at when talking about self inserts. That is definitely a part of that. I don't think it's necessarily an inherent bad, but it is a style of campaign that isn't for everyone. I used to get someone who wasn't playing in one of my campaigns to make the decisions for the villains, which is a kind of PvP, because it made them a much more active and challenging opponent.
Yeah, I've seen that. That also does kind of create a degree of separation between the GM and the encounters. And I've mentioned before where it does seem like a few games these days are designed in such a way as to separate the GM from the results of how a combat comes out. My main source on this one is still Zombicide Chronicles, where the players get to choose who's being attacked and how many of them are being attacked, etc. It's like, the zombies are always going to do this much damage. They're always going to attack. And it's up to the players to determine who's going to take the hit and who isn't, or who's going to dodge it or whatever. And I guess that's designed to just kind of, like I said, keep the GM separated from what happens on the table.
Don't forget to water your GM and put him where he can get plenty of sunlight. But
Yeah, I guess.
I think, and I hate to make the semantic argument that's one of these things that starts wars on X, because people run off to trying to make some kind of special definition to get out of admitting that maybe they didn't think things through. But I think the big separation is it PvP or CVC? Is it player versus player or character versus character? Character versus character is fine. Player versus player is where you have a problem. Because if it's the characters making character decisions that make sense with each other for their characters and operating as characters, it's generally not that bad. If it's a player deciding, well, instance, I want that Vorpal sword for my character sheet, then you got a serious problem. Or I'm just, I'm bored with this game, and rather than have a conversation with the DM, I'm going to blow the whole damn thing up. That's a totally different animal.
Yeah, that's a thing. But when I say PvP, I generally do mean character versus character. But of course, the players are the people behind the characters. It's the players who are the ones who are making the decisions. It's the players who are driving the characters. So it does kind of come down to PvP ultimately, because it's the player who decides whether or not their character is going to engage in harming other party members or attempting to get the better of other party members. And of course, it's the players who are going to have to deal with the resentment and the fallout from it when it inevitably creates bad feelings. If it's a game where you're supposed to be cooperating. And I think that's probably the biggest difference, is the fact that, while we did talk about, Braunsteins and other type games, most of the games that you play in any TTRPG setting are supposed to be cooperative. Maybe they do have differences. Okay, the elf doesn't like the dwarf doesn't like the halfling, the gnome hates them both, and all that. But everybody's kind of agreed to put their differences aside in order to, reach whatever goal it is they're after. Whether it's just, retrieving a box of loot or killing a bunch of orcs or whatever. Or a bunch of edge runners who got together. Maybe they don't necessarily like each other, but they're working together as a team so that they can accomplish a goal, whether it's, loot big money or protect this guy or whatever. I would even say that post-apocalyptic games have a huge element of cooperation, because it's kind of like in those type of games, you're literally depending on one another in order to survive. So it becomes a case of, even if you've got an asshole in the party, and Grim can attest, you know, we had a character who was like that. The player wasn't an asshole, but his character was. But, you know, you're literally counting on each other in order to survive, because it's a harsh environment and everything is against you. And the only people you do have to rely on is the guy standing next to you.
Yeah. And in post-apocalyptic campaigns, you know, healthy other human beings to talk to are pretty rare. So you should probably preserve them.
All right. Well, let's see that... let's take a look through the comments really quick and see if we can't get some people added into this conversation. So, Kit Marlowe, dude, I miss you. I do. PvP combat is boring, but you think all combat is boring, but the clash of agendas and priorities between characters can be the heart of great games. They can. I kind of think they need to be worked out ahead of time between the two players, just so that there isn't any misunderstandings. But they can also grow naturally in the game. It's like, you know, if the GM presents a particular situation or a problem, and you have characters who are sharply divided on their opinion between what to do about it, that can come to blows. I mean, in character, usually.
That's 100% right. That's where 90% of the PvP situations in my evil campaigns came from, like the Samurai Wizard I mentioned earlier. You had a disciple of Gratz, and you had a disciple of Demogorgon. And you know, one followed Gratz, one followed Demogorgon. They both wanted the wand of Orcus, so they worked together up until Orcus was dead, and then it came time to figure out which one of them was going to yank that wand.
Mm-hmm.
No homo.
Uh-huh. Kit says that requires a sort of metagaming, as in as much as there should probably be understood limits of how vicious and for keeps the conflict is. Yeah, definitely. If it's a little thing, like, you know, like who gets the healing potion after the battle or something like that, then that's probably not something worth PvPing for. You know, let them argue it out. I mean, I haven't ever seen a table come to blows over a healing potion, but I mean, stupider things have happened.
Yeah.
If you want PvP, just play a war game. Not necessarily. And besides, aren't all TTRPGs evolved from war games?
Nope.
Let's see. Jonathan Frost says, I'm against character versus character, but layer versus player. Give them both a kitchen knife and then queue up a long time. Player versus player. Okay. Yeah, you're indulging in semantics when you talk about that. I mean, you know what I mean, character versus character, but it is still player versus player, because as I said, the players are the ones controlling the characters, making it happen. RD says traditional if and only if the group can separate character from the player. Well, yes and no. I mean, if everybody at the table kind of agrees that it's an okay thing, it is what it is. Got a PvP at the end of a one-shot Wizard Tower raid, all for the Mountains of Treasure. Yeah, I've seen stuff like that happen. Everybody wants all the treasure or wants a bigger share of it, so they figure, hey, this splits better 3 ways instead of 4.
And it turns out to be an illusion, and it was just a pile of potatoes that the wizard had ensorcelled. Yeah.
Kit Marlowe again says, killing a character is just about the dullest thing that can come out of PvP in any game with a degree of death. Death is the least cruel thing that can happen to a character. I have your children. I mean, there are some who think so. But for the most part, everybody's kind of playing someone who is not necessarily that attached to whatever's going on. It's like, you know, if everybody's playing like an edge runner or something like that, unless somebody specifically cites, oh, I've got a dependent, I've got a sick mom who, needs the money that I make, it doesn't usually become a case of where somebody's in a position to hurt their children or their parents or whatever. But kudos to you if you do manage to leverage that kind of power over somebody else in a game. That's kind of a sneaky idea. It's like, I won't just kill you, I'll kill your entire family.
Make them into chili and feed it to you.
Yes.
I will wipe out their entire bloodline and I will vacuum their accounts from Russia.
Magnificent Devil, I love you, man. PvP is more trouble than it's worth. It rarely makes the game better. It usually ends up happening over stupid things. Yeah, it does. It does. Unless the game is something that's specifically engineered and built around PvP, or people have competing agendas and it's specifically set up that way by the GM. That's it doesn't help anything. I guess a really good example of something like that would be Vampire the Masquerade, or actually any White Wolf product.
Yeah.
Because inevitably, people are going to be playing all of their different factions, and the factions don't get along with each other usually. If you've got if you're playing Werewolf and somebody's playing the Get of Fenrir and then someone else is playing a Black Fury, well, they don't get along. So, having a couple of big pissed off werewolves going full Krynos form and, tearing the shit out of each other in a game, I've seen it happen. That's kind of the nature of that game, though. Not to mention, like in Vampire itself, it also kind of boils down to, you might be a coterie who's agreed to work together and such, but, how close do your ties with the coterie, how close are your ties with the coterie versus loyalty to your clan and whoever your primogen is?
Yeah, and that's often where a lot of the fun in Vampire comes from, is giving people conflicting loyalties.
Mm-hmm. PvP is much more interesting than PC versus PC. Well, it's the same difference.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes it is kind of funny to see somebody come across the table at somebody else over video or over a tabletop role play.
I've done it. So
Monopoly and Mario Kart responsible for more violence in real life than any other game.
I was thinking, either Mario Kart or Smash Brothers, but
Mario Party's pretty bad too.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, a session 0 should avoid any unwanted PvP unless it's some narratively important moment. Well, here's the thing. Quite a few of us, especially as older guys, don't really do session 0s. Session 0 is kind of a relatively new idea. I mean, technically, we had session 0s back in the day, but that was just part of building up your character. It would be just a case of where everybody sits down at the table and GM says, okay, I'm going to start a new campaign. Everybody roll up characters. That's the point where everybody starts talking about their characters and everything else. That's your basic session 0, but it usually tapers right on into we're jumping into action right as soon as everybody gets their character built.
Yeah, I mean, we just didn't call it session 0, but that is actually one of the big things, and what I think is probably the absolute best argument against the safety tools, which is and Atten over at We Love TTRPGs has made this point before too. The thing about safety tools is they're irrelevant. If you have the kind of player who you need safety tools for, A, they're not going to work, and B, you need to kick them off of your table. And if they're not the kind of player that you need safety tools for, you don't need safety tools. Because if somebody is going to be a raging jackass and they're there just to be a raging jackass, no amount of session 0s or X cards or anything is going to stop them from being a raging jackass.
That is true. That's true. I mean, that's just a person's nature. And we had people like that in our games, you know.
Just remember rule -1. Don't be a dick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I told you guys the story about how I had the GM who specifically re-engineered his combat encounter to kill my character, and only my character. I mean, and it was stupid. It was a stupid thing. It's like, you know, he got mad because he thought I was disrespecting his NPCs, and we nearly got into a knockdown, drag out fight. I nearly kicked the shit out of him. But, you know, stupid stuff. What about games that encourage PvP like Paranoia? Well, that's different. Like we said, some games actually encourage PvP. You really can't run a game of Paranoia without it. Because, again, it becomes a case of faction versus, you know, loyalty to the rest of the group kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, just stop for 1 or 2 seconds and think, does the statement I'm about to make equate to, well, what about PvP and Risk?
Yeah. Paranoia sets the expectations and makes it part of the fun and gives you reserved lives so that when you kill someone's character, it's not immediately permanent.
There is a recent-ish trend for rules as written in which players have the final say on whether their character dies. I don't mind this, but I'm a masochist as a player, and it kills a species of PvP stone dead. I mean, it can. If you're one of those people who is kind of like, yeah, I don't care if you kill my character. Ed says, first major campaign I was in had 2 parties of players. We had about a dozen players in my home group, so we did a massive good versus... Well, okay, see, that again, that's an engineered PvP. That's, you know, you're going in with the understanding that that's going to happen. James doesn't allow players to make characters that are designed to mess with other players. I point out the goal is to have fun cooperatively. Yeah. For the most part, I think everybody, when they sit down to game, it's with the understanding that it's supposed to be cooperative. Everybody wants to work together. And I kind of think that's one of the reasons why they came up with alignment systems, is so that, you know, everybody's kind of on the same page. It's like, okay, yeah, here's all the evil alignments. If you want to run together, you can. But for the most part, you know, here's all the good and neutral alignments, and they're all going to get along just fine, mostly.
In most fiction, when you have a mixed party, it's only for an episode or 2, and it's because there's some sort of common foe. Like when He-Man and Skeletor have to team up against whoever, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You see it as a regular story trope through all the series. You know, it's like, yeah, the 2 adversaries hate each other, but at the same time, they have to work together to stop this much worse bad guy. And how many times did we see the bad guy become popular and a regular member of the team? I mean, my favorite example is still Spike from the Buffy series.
Yeah.
Everybody, you know, he was a bad guy at first.
Doing a face turn.
Yeah.
Or Dragon Ball Z, where figuring out who the new friend is going to be is whoever they fought last season.
That's also kind of true, too. Mal says it usually only happens in our games when one player is an ass and the rest of the players tag team his character to take him out. It's happened a few times now, yeah. And he says, my favorite PvP is when one character goes on to do their own thing and our GM gives some NPCs to other PCs to control in a scene, e.g. guard stopping the rogue and asking for a bribe to look away. That's not really PvP, though, is it?
No, I stole that money. It's mine.
Tell you, I think there's a really great way to handle PvP if you just really want to keep it completely out of your game, and or really make sure that it really matters if they're going to try and do that stuff. It's real simple. Like, okay, so here's the deal. At my table, only NPCs and monsters attack player characters. So the second you decide to attack another player's character, you slide your character sheet over to me. It becomes an NPC, and we'll do the combat while you're rolling up a new character.
That's hardcore, but yeah, that's a pretty iron-fisted way of doing it.
See if it makes the. Let's see if the wizard or the fighter's Vorpal sword comes up missing now.
Yeah. It would definitely solve a lot of disagreements, I would think, just because it's kind of like, you're playing with the with the knowledge already in mind. It's like, yeah, if you try this is, your character is going to become an NPC. And there is a game that actually did that. And I always love to cite this one whenever I can because it was so perfect. Star Wars, the role-playing game from West End Games, the D6 system. You had Jedi characters who had light side and dark side points. It's been a while since I played this, so you guys correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if I remember correctly, your Jedi started accumulating dark side points if they started doing stuff that was considered malicious, evil, or whatever, but they also started picking up more powers, if I remember right, or it became easier to do things.
Yeah, I think dark side points were more powerful when you spent them, but they slowly corrupt you, and often there are consequences of your role playing. So, yeah, it's kind of like how Vampire's Humanity thing worked.
And I'm told, I don't know if this is true, but I'm told that, while the game was being developed, George Lucas pretty much told the designers, was like, look, I don't want players to play evil characters. Straight up. So that's one of the reasons why they developed the whole dark side mechanism in there, because they already knew that Jedi were, everybody wanted to play a Jedi, and Jedi were the most powerful characters in the game. So they had to balance it out by making sure that the Jedi didn't get out of line and start using their powers to do just whatever they wanted to and go nuts. Because what would eventually happen is if you accumulated enough dark side points and you slid into corruption far enough, literally your character became an NPC. I mean, that's pretty much how it was. But you went with that in mind, knowing, whenever you picked up that class, that was a possibility, But, they got so much right with that game. I'm really surprised that anybody thought that they could improve on that. And I've seen other editions of Star Wars come out since then. I'm just kind of like, it's still not as good as the West End game was one.
No. What about non-lethal dickery, or kendering, as you might call it?
Oh God!
The character isn't like actually harming any of the other characters, or really doing anything too bad, but they're just constantly pranking them or sabotaging them, shit like that. Or equally, the horny bard, in group attempting to romance people.
That is kind of like the comic relief character. They have a relatively short shelf life, and they have to be exceedingly well done, because it is a very fine line between you're annoying my character and we all think this is kind of funny at each other's expense, and you're just annoying to everybody, player and character, and we're about to go saran wrap your car and coat it in mayonnaise.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about kendering as a form of PvP.
I hope that term takes off now.
I do too.
I love kender.
I hate kender. I hate kender, and I hate players who play kenders because they always think it's so cute. Oh, I'm just doing my kender thing. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what kenders are, kenders were introduced in the Dragonlance series. The chief guy behind that being, Tasselhoff Burrfoot. And apparently Kinders have this thing about ownership, which they don't understand ownership very well. So it's a case of they'll just pick up whatever's laying around, or they'll borrow whatever they want to from you for whatever reason. Like, you know, like, oh, well, you know, you left this over here, so I figured you didn't want it anymore. Or I found this in your pocket. I was kind of curious about it. Sorry, I didn't tell you about it. Actually, they wouldn't even say, sorry, I didn't tell you about it. They would just be like, yeah, I just found this in your pocket. Kind of cool. Wanted to see it.
Well, and then it becomes a family heirloom too. But and Kinder's just like any other kind of PvP. It comes down to the player that's doing it. The biggest problem with the Kinder and their kleptomania and that sort of thing is that it inherently attracts the wrong kind of player. So
Yes.
if you have the right kind of person, it can be really entertaining and fun. That, you know, the Kinder keeps showing up with the wizard spell book that's a family heirloom from 14 generations ago, even though he's only had it for 16 minutes. But it becomes a problem when it's, like I said, the wrong kind of player who's literally lifting everything. It's like, why does your Kinder only steal really valuable stuff? Like, he didn't steal any pocket lint or, you know, the twist tie from the wizard's bread. He only steals things like the fighter's Vorpal sword.
My Kinder only took the priest's holy symbol once, and we almost died in a lair of hell. Okay. You love Kinders from 2E? Buddy, you're on your own on that one. I hate Kinders. I do. I hate when players play them. And I don't really like it when players play cutesy type characters like this either, because it kind of undermines the game, in my opinion. It kind of undercuts the seriousness of whatever is going on, and it kind of takes away some of the immersion to have this, ridiculous character who just, makes a living by pranking and being a douche to everybody by stealing stuff from them or playing tricks and all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of like...
You could use them as like a sort of flypaper for the game. It's like, okay, guys, make up your characters, anything you want. Okay, Phil, what are you playing? I'm playing Kenda. Nope, you're not. Get the fuck away from my table and never come back.
Yeah.
I'm playing a pansexual goblin. Nope, out.
So you hate my Quinn in Grimsgate? Actually, I did hate Quinn at first, but he's kind of become a little bit more endearing, so I'll give Quinn props. Bao, on the other hand, is... Yeah.
Well, I would say they definitely need to be like kind of a Dragonlance exclusive thing. They really don't belong anywhere else. But you'd also take the advantages, take advantage as the GM to play on their other stuff, like the complete lack of fear, by putting them in situations where the rest of the party's like, we probably shouldn't do that. Damn it, quit opening that. And hey, look, now we've got our combat encounter that the party's clearly trying to circumvent meta.
Yeah, that's the best use of playing Kinder in the game. And if you use that against them all the time, like, oh, hey, there's that magic jar that the 12-headed Hydra was captured in. Wouldn't you like to take a look at it? And the Kinder guy's like, I don't want to. And I'm like, no, you really do. In fact, you really can't resist picking it up off the shelf and opening it.
The gems in that skull over there on the table sure are shiny.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. They would. Can you imagine a Kinder in the Tomb of Horrors? It would be TPK.
Oh, I'd love it. And it may not be because of their luck and their ability to disarm things and their ability. They may just trigger half the damn traps and, dodge them and misses everybody else until they grab the skull with the gems in it because it's shiny.
I don't
or
know.
they lift the key and everybody drowns in the chamber with the blood flood because the Kinder stole the key before anybody could put it back in the hole where it belongs.
Yeah, and I suppose we should extend this, because it's not just Kender Kender are the chief most architect of this kind of crap, but people have extended that to goblins now too, because goblins are cute.
No.
No, they're not.
No, inevitably it always ends up being that way. It's like, somebody plays a small character and they think he's cute and they try to act cutesy, so they do cute things or things that they think are cute and silly and all this kind of stuff. And
the same thing happens with the stupid cobbles. Do people not read the Monster Manual entry where it tells you how these things behave? They don't behave that way. Not the kobolds, not the goblins.
Kobolds?
Yeah, they're little assholes, especially the goblins. They're just stupid.
Well, it depends on which game you're playing, because Paizo decided that, oh no, let's make the goblins let's make them PC races now that are in the core book in 2nd edition, because their homeland was destroyed and everybody feels sorry for the goblins, so now they've become part of regular society. And I'm just kind of like, you have to be kidding me, because goblins were the biggest enemy that you could face. In fact, in their very first adventure they published, that was the very first enemy you faced, was a goblin raid on your village where they were burning stuff and killing dogs and horses and all this other stuff.
Paizo is nothing but the id of the WotC development team. That's all they are. That's what they copy the same game and then go onto the worst places of Twitter to figure out what you want to put in terms of like flavor text.
I think funny characters are fine. It's lol so random characters that aren't fine.
Right.
Like Malkavians are meant to be crazy scary. In White Wolf, and if someone just is pretending to be a table or a hat stand or is spooky little girl number 37 this time with a pink stuffy hippo, it just becomes annoying. But funny characters can be fine. And I think there's so much humor in real life, even in the blackest of situations, that amusing characters are fine. But it's annoying characters that aren't.
I did a funny character once, but it was funny in such a way as to where the party became endeared to that character. And that was when we played Shadowrun.
Boo.
No. No. It was good. Somebody handed me a pre-gen, and it was a troll that they rolled up. And the troll was, massively overpowered on strength and everything else. Basically, he was a tank with a melee build. But that means he suffered pretty horribly in the brains department. So I basically played the troll like he was dumb as a bag of hammers, but he was super strong. And for some reason, it just worked because, I just, would play the characters like, okay. Why are we here? What are we doing? The big dumb character actually is kind of a form of like reverse Kender in a way, because they do stupid things, but they're stupid. So they're going to do stupid things. But they're also like the character you depend on whenever, the party gets into combat with something, or you got to break a door in, or you got to, lift a gate or whatever like that. And barbarians actually usually filled that role pretty good when they were introduced.
Well, the best comedy characters, just like the best comedy, typically arises from, chance situations and things that are, unexpected results to unexpected situations. So, and I look back at the two most enduring humor stories that ever happened in any of my games, and they involved a half-orc barbarian who just had the most insane stat rolls ever. He had a 16 in intelligence as a half-orc barbarian. So you had Grog Willsmash III, who was like a scholar and had little reading glasses and stuff, and used to make jokes about having infomercials where he was a lawyer and would say that the books in the back are just for show for the commercial. He smashes the opponent in court. And then we had a fighter Minotaur who clearly failed a move silent check, and the player just immediately goes, all right, I wave my axe and tell the guard to shut up. He didn't hear a damn thing. And he sees a bush. And that was the birth of Intimidating Hide, which just happened pretty much every time they needed to sneak somewhere from then on out.
Yeah, I've seen stuff like that. That's actually kind of funny when it does happen. If and it's cute. And most
of the paranoia stealth device, which is a loudspeaker that says, "By order of the computer, you didn't see anything."
Most of this discussion seems to be around D&D only. No, Goat, you missed it. We talked about Shadowrun. We talked about Vampire. We've talked about Cyberpunk. We've talked about a lot of other stuff too. Right now, it's kind of a little bit on the D&D-ish side because, let's face it, all right? Most of us, not everybody, but most of us grew up at some point playing D&D because it's the biggest animal in the TTRPG world. It's the most well-known. Say what?
It's the Tarrasque in the room.
Yeah, you can't go in. You can't go through the room without stepping around the Tarrasque in it, and the Tarrasque happens to be D&D. Now, which version of it you grew up on or started out on is different depending on how old you are. I mean, like I said, I've always said that I got started with BX, but
it's
then
also
I
because
graduated to AD&D.
Oh, sorry. It's also because D&D is very, very tropey. And because it's very, very tropey, it lends itself to painfully obvious examples where you don't have to get into these like nuanced arguments where somebody wants to come up with actually the such and such compendium of Star System 173 actually had these reasons, so that's why they behaved this way. You don't have that crap. It's like, the goblin, because he's a trope goblin, he's an obvious thing. The Kender, he's a trope Kender, he's an obvious thing. The Minotaur, whatever.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't come down to like nuanced disagreement to the like we're yes, they're like this in regular D&D. However, in such and such, they're like this. Or in Midnight, they're not actually called orcs. They're called this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
D&D is like a lingua franca for discussing general game concepts.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, I haven't done any research on this to be sure, but I'm pretty positive if you were to conduct a survey, I mean, like if you were to go right over to DTRPG right now and count up the number of core systems, I'm talking just core systems, not add-ons or anything else. But if you were just looking at core systems, I'm pretty sure the fantasy core systems would outnumber all of the other ones. And I'm talking about like horror. I'm talking about sci-fi and whatever other genres you want to name. I'm pretty sure fantasy is the biggest one.
Fantasy would outnumber them all combined.
I'm pretty sure that it would, because everybody's got a fantasy heartbreaker out there that they like. Everybody has read Lord of the Rings. Everybody has read Conan. Everybody has, read The Wheel of Time. Everybody's grown up with these fantasy stories or fairy books and movies and everything else. And that's the escape. I think that's one of the reasons why we like fantasy so much, is because it is such a departure from the bullshit we have to deal with in everyday life.
Well, everybody except for the designers at Wizards of the Coast have read them.
Apparently for some reason they just want to shoehorn all of their everyday crap and stick it into a fantasy world, which is like the complete opposite of what most of us want. I mean,
children yearn for the dungeons.
Yeah. I mean, even Cyberpunk is a departure from whatever we have to deal with in this world. Because even though it's very similar to our world, it's far enough advanced and dissimilar enough to get into it.
And what I do when I play Cyberpunk is I roll up a corpo and I go sit in an office and write mortgages for people.
That sounds fun. Go ahead, Grim.
As I say, Cyberpunk, they call it a dystopia, but while you're playing, your characters are people who have agency which is a utopian thing because mostly we feel at the mercy of the forces around us. In Cyberpunk, you can actually do something about it. And if some corpo disrespects you, you can shoot a motherfucker.
Yeah, that's true. You can't do that in the real world. You know, somebody makes you mad in traffic or something like that. You can't pull out your Malorian and fix that problem. But in Cyberpunk, you can.
That's the only part of Suburban Commando that's any good.
Oh, come on. That movie was good for all kinds of things. I mean, who could forget The Undertaker's voice in that game or in that show?
Yeah. What are you going to do? You're going to kick my butt? No, this is the 90s. I'm going to sue you.
I still loved it whenever the...
Thunder in Paradise was better.
I didn't see Thunder in Paradise, but I did see Suburban Commando. That was pretty funny. I still liked it whenever he was ripping out the car alarms just to... Wait, no, let's talk about this. No. But... maybe that's something else we should get into one of these days is movie talk at the table. Because, I mean, seriously, how often does it happen? I'm willing to say every single game session that you have ever played, ever, has had at least one person who has quoted a movie or a song during the course of the game. Whenever a particular situation arises that reminds them of it. Yes, no, maybe so?
Yeah, or taking a character concept from a film.
Oh, man, all the time.
Which
all
I don't
the time.
Because it gives them an easy role-playing hook. So
it does. That may be one of the problems I have with certain types of anime, though, because so many people are watching anime these days, and then they see the cutesy character, and they think, oh, I can play that in the role-playing game. And I'm like, no, you can't. The difference between that anime and this game is this is an active participation thing that depends on dice rolls, whereas that anime was written and scripted, and that character has plot armor.
Well, yeah, but I learned how to play D&D from Critical Role, so scripted is exactly what I'm after.
Go play Daggerheart, then.
Yeah. Also, you're 400 pounds and smell like a sock full of Gruyere. Convincing me that you're playing a tiny little anime girl is going to be difficult.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's... Wow, that's a juxtaposition right there.
Yes.
Yeesh.
People lead rich internal lives.
They do. Well, you know, again, it's another form of escape from reality. I mean, let's face it, if we're all men here, if we could all be like 6 foot plus and built like a, like a football linebacker. I mean, American football, not British football, but American football linebacker, and have the hot chick and 12 inches of swinging meat. Most of us, we'd jump on that, wouldn't we?
I don't know. That sounds kind of short for an arm. And negatory, I am a meat popsicle.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Lucky you, then.
Movie quotes.
Yes. See? Movie quote.
Yeah.
All right. Have
reference.
Have we kind of exhausted this topic, or?
I think so for now, unless anything they want to talk to us about.
I think we pretty well
question on anything. I can hang out a little bit longer because it's too hot to work.
I don't see the audience coming up with much. So, I mean, I guess in closing, you could really just say PvP is kind of like pretty much like it's largely dependent on your game style. If it's a cooperative style game where the players are supposed to be cooperating with one another in order to fulfill objectives, whether it's party based or whatever, there probably shouldn't be any PvP, or at least any PvP that that is gonna, destroy your game, because it can. And that may include not allowing certain alignments to be part of the party, or certain personality types to be part of the party. Like if you got your edge runners, and one of your party members, or one of your edge runner crew is a psychotic who takes lots and lots of drugs, and oh wait, that's just a normal cyberpunk character. But if it's
not edgelords.
Yeah. I guess a good example would be like, okay, Daryl Dixon from The Walking Dead. Daryl Dixon didn't necessarily start out as everybody's favorite character. He kind of became that way over time. But if you go back and you watch a lot of those episodes, he's pretty much standoffish, doesn't want anything to do with anybody else, is kind of a dick. Frequently a dick. And I know this because I'm rewatching the entire Walking Dead series right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, research. And he endears himself to everybody because, one, he shows that he's extremely competent at what he does, even though he's a dick. And despite the fact that he doesn't necessarily like anybody else to start with, he grows to like people as the series progresses. But he still manages to, make himself useful and get along with everybody, even if it's just by, keeping himself distanced from everybody. He's not the most friendly character in the show, but he became everybody's favorite just because, he proved himself time and time again what a cool character he was. That's why he's got his own series now. Let's see. No edgelords. Well, that's the thing. It's like, technically Daryl Dixon is an edgelord. But he's a popular edgelord. You could be an edgelord in the game, but you have to be an edgelord with an end goal in mind, or you have to have a way for your edgelord to grow. You can't just always play the edgelord.
Well, yeah, and you got to think, A, he's a character in a show, but B, the thing about the edgelords in all these books and novels and TV shows and stuff is they're not edgelords forever.
Yeah, they're not.
They evolve. The whole point is they're an asshole that nobody likes for approximately a season, if that, and then they turn into something that people actually care about.
Mm-hmm. Daryl actually, I think it really took him 4 seasons before he kind of started growing. Although, admittedly, at the end of, I want to say 3rd season, or is it 2nd? Yeah, 3rd season, whenever he sees what happened to his brother, that really that hit me with a rubbery one right there. Eclectic Goat, hot take, I don't like safety tools. That means I don't get them either. If characters do PvP or play characters I hate, too bad for me. If they don't get to say, I don't like X, then I don't either. I don't like safety tools. I don't use them. I mean, my safety tool is open your mouth and say something. That's the easiest safety tool I know. You don't have to hold up an X card. You don't have to just, tell me, okay, we're playing this, we're moving through this game. It's a cyberpunk game. Everybody's got their edge runners and their guns and everything else. And all of a sudden you see the monsters with the giant feet. And I know the Grim is going to say, can we, do we have to do feet? You know how I feel about feet t-shirt. And yeah. I'll be like, okay, let's, we can modify it a little. We'll see what we can do to make you feel a little bit better about it.
Or Grim says, excuse me for a minute, guys. I got to run to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Yes. You fight with the things with the feet. Once they're defeated, I'll come back.
Once they're defeated.
Yes.
Uh,
I
I
think
think
as long as you set expectations and you intervene early and often when things look like they might go off the rails, you should be fine. Doesn't need anything so formal as a session 0 or whatever. Just, there's going to be PvP, or there might be. So, yeah, keep an eye on each other.
Yeah. And, like I said, there's expectations of the games depending on what kind of game you're going to play. I mean, like if you're going to play Vampire the Masquerade, there's going to be PvP, whether or not it's overt or more subdued is kind of like up to each player individually. But players have divided loyalties, and they also have mechanics in place to keep them from just going nuts on each other, as well as society rules and everything else. It's one of the reasons why that game is so intricate. Player can't decide all of a sudden. Well, I guess they could decide all of a sudden that I'm gonna just willy-nilly embrace this person because I think they're hot, sexy, cute, whatever, and I want them to live forever. It's kind of like it becomes a case of now you got to go ask the Primogen if it's okay to do this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically, you're supposed to ask the daimyo before you have a formal Yaijutsu duel with somebody, but I mean, sometimes you just inform them that in an informal duel you cut their head off.
The letter is in the mail. It must have got held up.
Whoops.
Yeah.
All right, gents. I think we're about exhausted this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't know if you learned anything or not. Maybe you did. If not, then watch it again.
And don't forget to hit the like button.
Yes, definitely don't forget to hit the like button. I could use some more subscribers. Definitely. I can always use more subscribers because
sharing is always good. Sharing is caring.
Sharing out the link is always really good. I do appreciate that. And tonight, don't forget to catch me on Tuesdays with the Geeks when we'll have Ironcaster, and we got all kinds of interesting news. We got some comic news. We got some G.I. Joe news. We've got some Fist of the North Star news. We got all kinds of good stuff. Yes, drink. And I may have some Kevin Crawford news too. So.
Drink.
Till then, y'all take care and have a great week in Geek.
Look, the Dungeons and Dragons ride!